Someone once told me, Ayo, if all you see is what you see, you are blind. If what you see is all you see, you are still blind. At first, I was angry, but then I realized that there is a world out there that is deeper and richer than the one I know. The world does not start at my doorstep and does not end at my backyard. So if I must explore the world that is beyond my own personal knowledge, then I must go out there via tourism. And that is what we are focusing on today. Tourism and all shades of the discussion, from medical tourism to sustainable tourism. And that's how I want to say good morning, welcome to Earliest Union Soup News. This morning, my name is Ayo Jimmy, and we're beaming live from Lagos, Nigeria. Of course, Ola Oluwawe is standing by for the news update. Good morning, Ola.
Yes, good morning, Ayo Jimmy. It's a new day, new development, of course. Fortunately, we have them carefully packaged for you today on the morning news update. I am Ola Oluwawe. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the morning news update. Once again, I am Ola Oluwawe. Nigeria's unemployment rate has sharply dropped from 33.1% in March 2021 to 4.1% in the first quarter of 2023, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS. The drop isn't necessarily as a result of the provision of more jobs per working population, but the Bureau said it revised the way it calculated the unemployment rate in line with International Labour Organization ILO guidelines, which now provides quarterly national level results and annual state level results. The revised Nigeria Labour Force Survey, NLFS, considers individuals in low-paying jobs as employed, potentially overlooking poor working conditions and inadequate wages. While the data shows positive trends in employment rates and underemployment, there are concerns about whether the new rate truly represents an improving job market or merely a shift in classification. And moving on, the Central Bank of Nigeria has questioned the motives behind JP Morgan's estimation of the bank's financial accounts, emphasizing that foreign exchange reserves, like any account balance, are subject to fluctuations. JP Morgan had suggested that Nigeria's net external reserves had dwindled to an all-time low of $3.7 billion. But the director of the Monetary Policy Department of CBN, Hassan Mahmoud, insists that the CBN has maintained transparency in its operations and cautioned against interpreting exceptional liabilities out of context. Now, the federal government of Nigeria has announced the electrification of over 46 micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, households and public facilities through the deployment of 103 mini-grids, and over 281,000 connections are in progress. This initiative, carried out by the Rural Electrification Agency, REA, is part of Nigeria's electrification project funded by the World Bank. The performance-based grant PBG sub-component has been successful in attracting private sector investment in mini-grids, with over 80 mini-grids already completed and commissioned, connecting approximately 32,000 entities and providing reliable electricity. According to the Managing Director, Chief Executive of REA, Ahmed Salijo, the success of the solar hybrid mini-grid component has achieved 46,661 verified connections and has positively impacted over 230,000 people across Nigeria. Moving on, the Abia State government has initiated the distribution of 3,000 bags of rice received from the federal government as palliative measures. The special advisor to the governor and state chairman for the palliative distribution, Reverend Father Christian Anokoro, stated that the distribution targets the poor and vulnerable throughout the state, with each of the 184 wards receiving 14 bags. Representatives from the Nigeria Labour Congress NLC, pensioners, political appointees, and elected members are part of the distribution committee. Although disappointed by the quantity, the NLC representative indicated that more bags are expected to arrive and the distribution process will be transparent. Moving on, rescue efforts are in full swing in Nigeria's capital as a two-story building collapsed in the Garki area of Abuja, and it brought together emergency services who have successfully rescued 35 individuals from the debris. This shows the dedication and swift response of rescue teams, highlighting the value placed on every life. The head of the Abuja Emergency Relief Agency, Abba Idris, noted that those rescued have received medical attention, reinforcing the commitment to ensure their well-being. While the exact cause of the collapse remain uncertain, this story underscores the resilience and unity of the country in the face of adversity, especially as heavy rains and strong winds persisted over the night. And gradually we move on to global developments after this break. Get ready for some updates on the just concluded BRICS summit and more. And welcome back to the morning news update. I am Olaoluwa, where I start with the updates and reactions from BRICS Summit. Former Nigerian President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo has questioned the necessity of using the dollar for global transactions, emphasizing the desire to buy from India without relying on the dollar. This sentiment was echoed by leaders from Brazil and Russia, who called for a shift away from the USD and the exploration of alternative currencies for international trade. While moving away from the dollar poses significant challenges and complex questions with no easy solutions in sight, leaders all discussed the need for the development of a new international currency. While the Chief Financial Officer of the New Development Bank, NDB, Leslie Mastrop, revealed that a financial institution established by the BRICS group is looking for alternative ways to reduce the reliance on dollar. He said this goal is still a long-term ambition rather than an immediate plan. And still on BRICS, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says the BRICS group has extended membership invitations to 6 countries, namely Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This was revealed at the just concluded 15th BRICS Summit held between August 22 to August 24 in Johannesburg. The move signals the bloc's intention to expand its alliance, which currently consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. South Africa's Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor confirmed that the leaders had reached an agreement on guidelines and principles for considering new members, but a finalized admission framework had not yet been signed. And moving on, in a proactive effort to ensure the transparency and integrity of the voting process, Zimbabwean police have confirmed the arrest of 39 election monitors. These individuals, connected to some civil society groups, were involved in coordinating an independent count of election results. With this, the Zimbabwean authorities seem to be taking measures to address any potential disruption by safeguarding the democratic process. Some civil society groups, including various election monitors, also aim to contribute positively to this process by independently verifying results. Following concerns about explicit content and the promotion of violence and hate speech in Kenya, TikTok CEO Shozi Chu has engaged with Kenya's President William Ruto, and an agreement that signifies a new chapter for the video sharing platform's presence in East Africa has been forged. TikTok's move aligns with a broader strategy that includes establishing an office in Kenya. President William Ruto expressed optimism about this collaboration, assuring his people that TikTok's operation in the area would be effectively coordinated from Kenya. And moving on, Mozambican doctors and healthcare workers have suspended their month-long strike, which had severely impacted public health services. President Filipe Nyusi's appeal for them to return to work to protect the well-being of Mozambicans resonated with their commitment to the nation's health. The chairman of the country's medical association, Milton Tatia, highlighted the creation of a new negotiation team led by Prime Minister Adriano Meleni as a reason for their return to work. And moving on, Argentina's economy faced a 4.4% decline in economic activity in June, which was slightly lower than expected. Contributing to this dip has been the agricultural sector, which recorded a 40.4% year-on-year drop due to severe drought conditions. Argentina, known for being a major grain exporter, has grappled with the worst drought in 60 years. Despite these challenges, analysts anticipate improvement in the second half of the year as the agricultural sector gradually recovers with the return of rains. This recovery is expected to alleviate the overall economic downturn, offering hope for Argentina's economic stability in the near future. And the UAE cabinet has approved a back-to-school policy to enhance the work-life balance and well-being of federal government employees. The policy allows parents who are federal government employees to have flexible work hours on the first day of school, ensuring they can accompany their children and actively engage in their education. The policy also provides flexible working hours during the first week for parents with children in nurseries and kindergartens. And this will not only improve the quality of employees' lives by enabling them to participate in their children's educational activities and events, it also shows the government's focus on job satisfaction and happiness. And moving away from the Middle East, a recent research conducted in the United Kingdom suggests that artificial intelligence eye scans could identify Parkinson's disease, PD, in individuals before symptoms emerge. Led by experts from London's Moorfields Eye Hospital and the UCL Institute of Ophthalmology in the UK, the groundbreaking research used AI to analyze a data set identifying retinal markers that differentiated individuals with Parkinson's from those without the condition. The study examined data from over 154,000 patients aged 40 and above who had visited London eye hospitals between 2008 and 2018. Notably, individuals with Parkinson's showed a reduction in the thickness of specific retinal layers detectable on optical coherence tomography OCT scans. And moving on, China has quietly reinitiated its 1,000 Talents Plan, TTP, which aimed to recruit foreign-trained elite scientists under a new name and format as part of its mission to increase technological proficiency. The program, now known as Kunming, offers perks such as home purchase subsidies and substantial signing bonuses, with a focus on recruiting individuals trained at top foreign institutions, particularly those with doctorates from prestigious universities and overseas experience. This resurgence in talent recruitment aligns with President Xi Jinping's emphasis on achieving self-reliance in semiconductors amid United States export restrictions. And that's the size of today's package on the Morning News Update. The most important thing is to see opportunities in everything and be the solution to the challenges. That's how great entrepreneurs move, I believe. I am Olaoluwa. You may now join Ayo and Blessing for more Morning Boosters.
All right, good morning. Thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange. Someone perhaps thought I was missing in action. No, that never happens here on Early Exchange. All right, now let's look at some of the stories that made the news this morning as read by Olaoluwa Awe. Okay, The Nigeria's unemployment rate has sharply dropped from 33.1% in March 2021 to 4.1% in the first quarter of 23, according to data provided by the National Bureau of Statistics. Now, they say the drop isn't necessarily as a result of the provision of more job per working population, but the Bureau said it's changed the way it calculated the unemployment rate in line with International Labour Organization guidelines. Before moving forward, I need to introduce to you Idawusa Usamanze, who is Director, Policy and Research, Africa Development Studies Center, ADSC, who's looking very African this morning and ready to start with the conversation. Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Blessing, good morning. Ayo, good morning.
Inakwana.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Good morning, welcome.
All right, sir. Now, the NBS says it has changed the way it calculates unemployment rates in alignment with or in compliance with the International Labour Organization guidelines. So, resulting from that, there's been a sharp drop in the unemployment rate of Nigeria from 33.1% to 4.1%. Now, according to the guideline, the revised labor force survey now considers individuals in low-paying jobs as employed, regardless of the working conditions and inadequate wages. But the concern is that this trend may show that the employment rate as dropping, but it may be misleading because it's calculating those who were receiving poor wages as employed compared to what it was doing before. But I know that there's a segmentation. There are those who are unemployed, there are those who are underemployed, who fall into the category of earning less that perhaps they should earn, and there are certain working conditions. But now, changing the way it is calculated, on the face value, someone may feel that, oh, unemployment rate in Nigeria has actually improved. What's your take?
Well, I think what we need to really do as a nation is we get to that point where we can begin to really rely on our figure. As a person, I have never believed in NBS reports. And the reason is very simple. You see, we go to the field, we do just dive samples. In all the trainings I've had, I always do this sample every day. If you have seen MBS or its agent in your place taking records, raise up your hand. And I think it's only in one place I saw one person raise up hand and say, I've seen MBS. And I don't know, blessing, whether you have seen MBS.
No, I haven't.
So how do we arrive at figures that we brandish? And I think this is where a whole lot needs to be corrected in Nigeria, where we need to take data very seriously. And this, for me, is the beginning of the transformation of our economy. Because if you don't have the right data and right statistics, there's no way you can make plans for your population. That said, you also understand the nature of our economy. A lot is driven by informal sector. A lot of people are doing stuff, and they are earning a living via it. How do we put this into account? These are not taken care of until you do a base census that is correct and adequately account for everybody in Nigeria. You will not be able to get the actual figure of unemployment. All you will get are also estimates that may not be as reliable as possible. I think NBS need to do a lot more in terms of authenticating its own data. And I don't think really that it should be international bodies that should tell us what to do.
I agree with you. Yesterday, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, we took a look at slavery. When we spoke about neo-colonialism, when even our data is being dictated by outside bodies. it's been validated by people not within our own geographical confines. That is a shame to us as a nation, because we have, what does it take really to go to the grassroots and administer questionnaires and talk to the real people and get to see what they feel. But for me, beyond the NBS revelation here, for me, the experience is still largely the same for Nigerians. The joke is told of a woman that was at a church service, and they said all widows should come out, and she came out while her husband was there. You are not a widow. My experience is still was that of a widow. So a lot of Nigerians that are even reclassified now as employed, as they know they are still unemployed really. These are just figures for me. At first, I almost jumped before I read the full story.
Yeah, that's why I said that face value, one could take it that, from 33.1%, there's been a sharp decline to 4.1%. So people will begin to marry that, something significantly has changed in the job market. But when you look deeper, you get to understand that it is just a change, perhaps, in the formula.
You see, it's just to look at basic demographics. There are a lot of things we can fix with our head.
Definitely. Without
really going to do a lot of calculations. Look at our demographics and look at the age structure. Between 20 downwards, what's the percentage of our population? People who should be in school. So because when you are taking employment figure, you are looking at people who are supposed to be at their active life. I think in between 25 when people are off school, or 21, and then looking at it at 60. These are things that you're going to look at. And these are the figures you're going to use in determining who is employed or who is not employed. The real truth is that we don't have as much number as this. And this, I remember some years ago, one of our presidents, and he was talking about Nigerian population, and said, according to World Bank, we need to do a lot about our data. I said to somebody recently, I am even in doubt if we are up to 200 million people.
Because we haven't conducted census in
we have not been able. Since 1953, Nigeria has not been able to count itself. This is a problem.
So what have we been doing with our census?
This is the issue.
It's been
Every census has ended in a trouble or in a conflict. So this is the thing that we need to deal with. We need to number ourselves. And like I've always said here, it's because we have elevated politics over and above progress. That's why we have not been able to count. If you look at the data we got from the voters register, it shows you some level of understanding that even when we say we had about 99 million people who were of voting age that registered, we didn't even have enough of them collect PVC. And some PVC are still trapped. Let's call that voter apathy. Take the NIN registration. As of today, we are still at 100 million. Since 2013. So this speaks to the way things are handled in our environment. We want to do census. It was like we want to build a skyscraper that will get to the moon with a budget that nobody can really ascertain. We don't need so much budget. If you ask Nigerians to come to their council, to come and register themselves, they will come and declare. So this is a problem. Data is a problem in Nigeria. And until we get data right, planning cannot be right and development cannot occur.
All right, talking about development, this has been more like a front burner issue in recent times where some countries are beginning to champion the advocacy for the dollarization. So former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of Nigeria, has questioned the necessity of using the dollar for global transactions, emphasizing the desire to buy from India, for instance, without relying on the dollar. Now, that sentiment has been echoed by leaders from Brazil and Russia, who called for a shift away from the dollar and the exploration of alternative currencies for international trade. Now, this as part of the conversation at the BRICS Summit. Now, this, like I said, has been a front burner issue in recent time. What's your take? Is it something that is feasible?
Well, blessing, people can speak to issues. I appreciate what Bason just said. And I think it's just raising some curiosity and questions about international politics. Now, the big issue here is that none of us sitting down here, neither Obasanjo himself, can determine what currency that will be used in doing international trade. Now, I've said to you before, when you look at Ray Dalio's work, who studied the history of the world for 500 years, he saw a trend he calls the big circle, how the world evolved. And this thing has been repeating itself over history. And according to Ray Dalio, what he observed in history is that whoever wins the war sets the new order in terms of the monetary, economic, and politics. Now, when you look at where we are, America won the war in 1945 during the Second World War. So they deliberately dictated and determined what the new economic order is. Don't forget that Buhari attempted to see, okay, we had an agreement with China that since we are importing a lot of things from China, let's begin to use the Chinese currency to buy from China. Did it work?
Oh,
it didn't work.
The time when we had a discussion of the currency swap.
I think for me, while what you said is very valid, that he who wins the war really dictates the policy and the monetary policies across the world. But there is no empire that will last forever.
We know.
Even the dollar empire will come down at some point.
At some point in
and
history.
The world has started the conversation now. It may not happen in our time, but at some point, the dollar must give in.
Let me give you the picture painted by Ray Dalio. What he says is that, how does this change occur? The change does not occur on the table. The change occurs first in the head. And he said, what you find is that you see a season where people are creative. They are put value on education. And then, of course, increases productivity, and the wealth of that particular country increases. And as the wealth of nation increase, what you see will follow is that people will be investing so much and taking so much money, then you will have a debt crisis like we are currently facing at the moment. Now, follow this debt crisis, and depressions that come will be kind of wars. Inter-tribal wars, you'll be seeing all manners of war, big wars happen, and at the end of the day, everybody will be struggling for peace. And he who wins that war eventually becomes the one who dictates what happened. Britain has done it. The Dutch has done it. America is doing it. Now the question is, who is going to win the next war? So and that will determine which currency that people will want to use for their reserve.
So at the end of the day, it comes down to replacing one currency with another.
Yeah.
Not like nothing much would change.
Yes.
All right. Still in relation to the BRICS summit, which was concluded yesterday in Johannesburg, the BRIC has extended, is just trying to extend its alliance by extending invitation to some countries, namely Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. One would have thought that
unfortunately Nigeria is not in that
would have been there.
What are we bringing to the table in the first place?
No, I think we have something to bring to the table.
We have a lot on the table. The real problem is that we have not been as active in terms of our international engagement.
Okay.
All right. I resist the temptation of calling out any African country that was called to the table, because we need to wrap up the conversation here right now. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. We're going to break, and when we return, we'll begin to look at sustainable tourism. Stay tuned.
Thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange on Soup News. Now we want to take a look at sustainable tourism. The good book says we should dominate the earth, subdue it, and replenish. But the tragedy is that we are so focused on, dominating and subduing that we forget the other component of the equation, which is to replenish it. And I do say this. None of us has the memory of what happened when we were in the womb. We have no idea what impact we had on that particular environment. And none of us will be able to say for sure what we will do posthumously, because we won't be part of that world again. But today is all we have. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And we can measure and gauge our own impacts today. How do we subdue the earth without making it look devastated? How do we explore the abundance that this earth has to offer without making it go into waste, without consuming the future of children unborn? That is the whole premise of sustainable tourism. Every day we jet out. Every day people move from one part of the world to the other to explore the beauties of this world. What are we doing, or what are we meant to do to ensure that we preserve this world or the beauties of this earth as much as possible and don't destroy the world that is ours to keep? And that is what we are talking about today on sustainable tourism. Blessing.
Oh yes, the goal of sustainable tourism is to ensure that the socio-economic and even environmental aspects of a destination are considered, even as that destination may try in all efforts to encourage tourism. First of all, when we talk about the environment, when you are inviting tourists or you receive tourists to a particular destination, for the environmental aspect, it may be to ensure that there is respect of wildlife, because some tourist attractions may be around that area. Maybe there's you have a reserve, like we have the Lekki Reservation Center in Nigeria. You have people even from one part of Nigeria going over there to find out what's happening there, what is this area all about. And you also have people coming in that they respect that area and not even going to hunting of some animals that may be found in that area. That's part of what sustainable tourism is talking about. And then when you talk about the social preservation of that area, because when tourists are coming from other places, there's an interaction with the natives of the place. So respecting the social culture of that place is also part of it.
It is actually, because I can picture what happens when a typical African, maybe from a Nigerian village, who is used to hunting, I can picture what happens when he goes out there, maybe to another country for tourism, except he is guided. The basic instinct for someone in the village here is to, hunt games, really. Of course. And you go there. That's why you see people going there and poaching occurs. And if you're not careful, you may violate some international, laws, or even the laws of the land where you go there as a tourist. So we need to really understand, while we explore the universe, while we go from one part of the world to the other to explore the beauties over there, we must pay attention to the norms over there. We must pay attention to what is permissible, and we must know that yes, nature is self-sustaining only to the extent that we allow it to self-sustain itself. If we keep on deploying the resources, both fauna and flora, as they say in biology, it's just a matter of time, nature becomes bare and nothing will happen. Now, there are issues with sustainable tourism, because when men come together into a new environment, they interact with nature, like you say, and they want to take as much as possible. We talk about relics, talk about mementos of the tourist center. But then, how do you get to the point where you know what to touch and what not to touch, what to take and what to leave there, and how to replenish the environment? That is the issue. Okay,
what to touch, what not to touch. That's why you have tour guides in particular areas that guide the tourists to areas that they should go into, how they should even behave in those areas. For some areas, you also have inscriptions. There are signs that guide the tourists, where you may not have a tour guide to necessarily follow people that way. And there's also the deployment of technology. You have surveillance cameras that also watch the activities of tourists within certain areas. But that's one part that I think that in Nigeria, for example, we've not deployed that for some of our tourist centers. We probably just trust the intentions of people, thinking that, oh, they just want to see what the place is about, and that's it. But sometimes these things are put in place to ensure that people know what to touch and what not to touch. And there are some parts of the center that you may have some parts that are dangerous. People should not get into that place, and these are just areas that should be taken note of to ensure that we have sustainable tourism. Now, to talk further on this, we have someone who will be joining us via Zoom to talk about this. Ayo wants to tell you about her.
Okay, we have Charlotte Koch from the UK, who works with them for green architecture, and she is talking about sustainable tourism. Good morning, Charlotte. Good morning. Can you unmute yourself?
Good morning, everyone.
Oh, good morning.
It's a pleasure
Great.
being here.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Okay, let's start this way. What is sustainable tourism, and why does it matter for our continent and the entire world in particular?
I will jump directly to the topic, picking up from where you ended before, with giving a citate from the UN General Secretary, the former Taleb Rifari. He had said, growth is not the enemy. It's how we manage it that counts. And that I think suits very well to what you just said before. So taking that as a background, that is one of the reasons why not only the UN, but also, for instance, the EU has taken action with a new CSRD, Sustainable Reporting Directive, which will be paired with financial reporting, and that is already going on. So picking up from there, I will start with saying, what is sustainable tourism? What is the definition of it? First of all, I would start not with sustainable tourism, but with the word sustainability, because the word sustainability actually comes from Germany more than 300 years ago. There was a guy called Hans Carl von Karlowitz who transferred the idea of sustainability to forestry. And he's considered the father of sustainability. According to Karlowitz, in order to implement sustainable action, only as much should be cut down in a forest as the forest can regenerate naturally in the foreseeable future. The principle of sustainability should ensure that a natural system is preserved and its essential characteristics in the long term. This approach laid the foundation for sustainable thinking and action, and was later taken over by the Club of Rome and turned into the word sustainability in English. In German, the word was Nachhaltigkeit. So this just as a background. Sustainability means long term, and therefore sustainable tourism is key. You might be aware of that during the Rio Plus 20 conference, UN conference, there was a paragraph 130. I'm taking this because we are starting up in the helicopter from the bird's view and look at the overall topic. And that's why I'm citating it now, and then we will talk freely after that. Sustainable tourism. Environmental awareness, conserve and protect the environment, respect wildlife, flora, biodiversity, ecosystems, and cultural diversity. Improve the welfare and cultural diversity, and improve the welfare and livelihoods of local economies and communities by supporting their local economies and the human and natural environment as a whole. In paragraph 430 is also a call for change support for sustainable tourism activities and relevant capacity building in developing countries in order to contribute to the achievement of sustainable development. In paragraph 131, member states encourage the promotion of investment in sustainable tourism, including ecotourism and cultural tourism. Why is this? Because we can't split things apart. It is not humans or money. It's not financial aspects or activities and culture and nature conservation. Like we say, artists can only sell their art if there are people who have money and who can buy it. And it's exactly the same with cities and communities and sustainable tourism. So the challenge is to find the balance between tourism and involving without destroying the local communities, and how do we get universities, education, government, and organizations, tourism agencies, all brought together, and the local people on the ground.
All right, Charlotte. In achieving this balance, what are the challenges that some environments face in trying to have sustainable tourism?
Some of the challenges is that they get too overcrowded. That is one thing. That is with a balance to keep nature in balance and also tourism in balance. And it can also be bad conditions for the workers, and it can destroy nature and wildlife. All the topics that I just mentioned before, that was in the UN description for what we should care about with sustainable development.
Okay, now.
So maybe I will turn it upside down and instead give you the answers on what can sustainable tourism do. It can preserve natural wildlife, avoid harming local culture, and provide social and economic benefit for local residents as well. But we need everyone on board, and positive impacts of sustainable tourism can be job creation, cultural heritage preservation and interpretation, wildlife preservation, landscape restoration, etc. Because tourism can also bring money.
Okay, Charlotte, we know that tourism brings in money, and especially the value chain, all the players along the value chain, the hotels, the restaurants, and so on and so forth, they are part of the money makers in that particular value chain. But then the onus of promoting sustainable tourism lies on members along this value chain as well. What can hotels, restaurants do? What kind of eco-friendly policies or practices can they adopt to ensure that we have sustainable tourism, since they are money makers on the value chain?
Yes, we come from. I have personally, I have a background in tourism. In my earlier years as a tourist guide, so I was on the ground in the machine room with the hotels, and I know how they think. But what we need to teach them today, I'm in sustainable architecture, green buildings. We deal with the energy efficiency in new buildings, carbon neutral green buildings, but also retrofit and refurbishment of existing hotels and buildings that gives them improved carbon footprint, of course, but and lower operational costs and resource efficiency. So they protected the environment at the same time that they do something for their own pocket and purse.
So what should hotels?
And that is important.
What should hotels and restaurants do? What kind of eco-friendly practices, apart from using carbon-free or carbon-neutral materials to build? What should they do as they guide tourists to ensure that we have sustainable tourism? That's the point I'm trying to find out here. Thank you.
Yes. The reason why I started with this sustainable reporting directive from the EU is exactly why for that reason, the EU, for instance, but also UK, but today, there's the environmental social governance investing, which is ESG. So the whole world is looking at connecting sustainable development with risk management, but they are also measured on their sustainable or not sustainable impact. So therefore, what hotel owners should do is that they should care about their footprint and their environmental commitment and a resource efficiency, at the same time doing something good for themselves, saving money and resources. Some of the reasons, ways that you can do that is, that's the low-hanging fruit, renewable energy. Renewable energy is green energy. At the same time, it can help to self-sufficiency and independency on the grid and secure energy supply, because especially hotels, they have a huge amount of energy need for cooling energy, but also electricity. Just the same if it's the air conditioners or the electricity for whatever they do, and cooking, but also for refrigerating. So renewable energy is key. And if it is done through integrated planning, integrated energy design, that is what we do, architecture, where we consider also the energy concept in the early stages of the project, just the same whether it's in looking at the whole project for refurbishment or if it's a new building. Because then if we optimize in the early stages, we save a lot of money in the later stages. And that is why the pre-stage of the projects are so key, because it saves a lot of money in the later stages. That is one of them. And then, of course, there are green technologies that can do a lot and help us save resources and become more efficient. We have to look also at water. For instance, I know a country like, I was very happy actually, already in 2006, I was giving a presentation in Germany at an African energy conference, and there was the CEO of Kengen from Kenya, and he talked about geothermal energy, and I was happy to hear that that was going on in Africa already at that time.
Because let's talk about the role of the tourists. We would not be talking about tourism if we don't have tourists who go to those tourist sites. So what is the role of tourists in ensuring sustainable tourism?
The role of the tourist is that they are more and more of the tourism potential are absolutely committed to sustainability, which means they will look exactly after, when they choose their hotel and their travel agency, whether this is a hotel or a travel agency with a commitment to sustainability. And that is therefore key to the business. At the same time, and that's a good thing about it, by making it key, we automatically protect the environment. And that's what sustainable business is about, that we can do something good for ourselves, our guests, all of us, our world, our planet, people, planet, and society, but at the same time also for our pocket and for the environment and nature. And when we then take it into the deeper steps, it's also about responsible job creation.
Thank you for that. In all
so
of
we
this,
can go deeper, if I'm allowed to go into that right now. There's also local food production.
All right.
Local food production is about health.
Okay.
You wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to. I was about to say that in all of this, education becomes very important. And when I say education,
Yes.
I don't mean within the four walls of the classroom. I am talking about the kind of education that a typical tourist must have before he or she embarks on tourism. Do you think we are doing, or do you think those who are encouraging tourism, those who are advertising tourism, are they doing enough education of the would-be tourists to make them conscious of sustainable practices? And who should do that, essentially, if they are not?
No. The answer is definitely no. There's not being done enough. And you just hit something that is very much close to my heart: education of sustainable leadership. We are already involved in that in Africa, because we see it as a crucial key to secure that we can achieve the goals that we set ourselves on sustainable tourism in Africa. And the sustainable leadership and sustainable management starts on the CEO and executive level. But it must also be implemented on all levels of the organization, across the organization, and also with the business partners. So it's a hand-in-hand together approach, an interdisciplinary multi-partnership approach that we need here. But we have to start somewhere. So I will really encourage us to do, and also maybe even have a new conversation on another day where we go deeply into education on all levels on sustainable tourism and sustainable leadership, because this is so key. We can't execute things and make real action on the ground if we do not know what we are talking about. It is so important.
Okay, you mentioned that it starts from the table of the CEO and then to the lower level. But what about communities where these tourist centers sometimes are sited? How do we incorporate the communities in the decision-making process towards tourism development?
The first thing is to help them and work with them and make them understand why this makes sense. What is the purpose of this? Because if they actually, it's the same thing as what we do with clients when we start a project with them. If they first come to start understand why how much sense this makes, not only from an idealistic point of view, but also from an economical point of view, and can give added value, then they can't sleep if they don't do it. So therefore, it is absolutely key with stakeholder involvement. And with that is again where training and education comes in. I will give a little low practical example that I learned during the Durban UN Climate Conference in South Africa. I think it was 2011. I went to an event where Brazil and Africa should learn from each other about sustainable forest management. And they told that in Brazil, they had stopped flying researchers in to monitor in the forest. They had made very successful projects where instead they had given a smartphone with an app on to the local people who lived in the forest and asked them to do the monitoring. Of course, the researchers were still involved. But the good story about this is because it was the local who got involved in the monitoring. As the project stopped, the research project, after 4 years, the monitoring went on because the local people felt ownership. And that is a key word for what we are talking about here. It must be a natural part of society in the local community. And it can be adding absolutely value and income and create jobs to the local communities.
I appreciate
So
that.
that is why dialogue across disciplines, but also stakeholders, is key.
I appreciate
And
that.
I think that is
Okay.
something you could also involve in.
Yeah, definitely. Let's look at the place of technology. Okay.
Yes.
So let's look at the place of technology in promoting sustainable, tourism. You just mentioned that the natives were given smartphones to use, and they owned it. Beyond, just giving them phones, what more can be done with respect to technology to promote sustainable tourism? Because the question today is not what is tech, but what is not tech.
of course, with the opportunities today, AI is there. There is everyone has a smartphone. We can make applications, apps that are teaching people and inspiring people how they can contribute with sustainable behavior, just the same if it's staff, if it's tourism, as a tourist, if it's the travel agencies, it is the hotel owners, or if the local communities. And we can make excursions to ecotourism and different activities where we inspire them even to maybe volunteer and take part. That is volunteering in ecotourism that is very popular, by the way, as an example. But of course, there's many ways, and all the the tourists, they have a very big footprint on energy and resource use in Africa and on the African continent, but also worldwide. So it is important to also educate tourists and make them also responsible for their own behavior, and not just that they sit back and buy a green holiday or a sustainable package. They are part of the concept. They have to walk the talk themselves as well. And that is one of the things that can be done with digital technologies and applications. I actually was during the Nobel prize giving in Scandinavia. I was, I think 2 years ago, I was in a hotel with a digital butler. You had to check in yourself, and the butler was also an iPad in the room that could ask you all the questions that you needed to get asked. I don't say that that is the future alone. I believe in people and human interaction, but it can exist. It is not the one or the other. My husband normally says, when we are in the underground in London, he said, look, all these people, they are just sitting with their smartphones. It is homo smartphones. It is not homo sapiens anymore. And Africa has so much to offer. So that sustainable tourism and giving these skills and inspiration to people who come from outside, just see how they live and what they can do with their hands and what they know by tradition and heritage. Just the same, if it's on health and medical tourism, can with alternative medicine and solutions that are, and biomedicine has also a big potential. Mm-hmm. But we need communication tools. Social media, when we are talking about technologies, is also something, of course, that can have a big impact. And the today's apps on currency is, of course, also something that makes life easier today.
All right, now let's talk about the role of government. How can government incentivize tourism organizations to adopt sustainable practices?
I believe in what I said before. They also need to understand their role and how they can make a difference. Someone once said in a presentation and on an African conference, if you want to start a project, don't involve government. If you want to make a big, to grow your project, involve government later. That is one way to see things, and it might be true in many cases, but I haven't given up the hope that we can involve government from the start. And government has a big role to play in tourism, because they can go in and together with tourism organizations, set the conditions for securing that we reach the goal by regulating or pushing or with incentives, make things possible. And that starts from education, it starts from legislation, and it can be on, for instance, where we are very far in other parts of the world already, with energy efficiency, which means a lower carbon footprint. And we can, and that, I'm just coming quickly back to the construction then also. We had a hotel refurbishment where we did a feasibility with 300 key hotel. We found out they could save 95% on the energy bill by refurbishing. Imagine what that would mean if that was just the half of Africa, where we could do the same. That is amazing. There are huge potentials, but things don't happen if people don't get incentives, or if people don't get to understand and somehow is motivated for investing in the change. They must experience it. It's not enough to tell them about it. And government can help there together with the financial sector.
Okay.
Financial sector has a key role in all this to happen as well.
All right, Charlotte, I'm impressed by your submission there, and the fact that you are calling on to African leaders to do so much more by involving the people in sustainable tourism. But let's look at the peculiar challenges of African countries. We have the challenges of fund, infrastructure, instability here and there. What more can we do to navigate our way around these challenges that are peculiar to Africa? In some parts of the world, they are talking about over-tourism. But here, maybe we are having the challenge of under-tourism. What can African leaders do to circumnavigate the challenges that they face peculiar to them?
I think the same thing that has been done in other countries. Inspire the people by walking the talk. Making good examples that people can come, touch, visit, understand, and that can be monitored, like the forest that I talked about. That can happen to buildings also. Pilot projects that we can learn from, and then exchange programs across regions, countries, etc., so that they can learn from each other. We did some years back in Germany the worldwide first carbon neutral green supermarket. It's today a rollout of more than 200. I can just show it quickly to you here. You see here, it's wood-based materials. So, and we have solar cells as the roof. It's not a roof and solar cells. The solar cells are the roof. And today, this building is a high standard, but at the same time, it's very economically viable. For that reason, there are more than 200 of them today. So things can be done. But at that time, we wanted to make a daylight supermarket. And our client said, stupid architects, daylight in a supermarket. We want to insulate the apples to look green, the chocolate should not melt, and the meat shall look more red. But we explained them, it's all possible. Together with, we can control the daylight and save energy and electricity at the same time. So we actually save 30% on the electricity bill, though because we use a natural daylight, but we control it with sensors and technologies so that we don't have a chocolate that melts. And we have green apples and red meat, etc. It's all doable today. So it's about integral solutions. And if we get practical examples on the ground that people can learn from, and then form legislations out from and be inspired by, then I am 100% sure that there will be a number of first movers around Africa who are also committed to sustainability. A lot of people don't do anything because they don't know where to start and how to take it. And sustainability, I just want to mention that because I haven't said it before today, has for all three pillars, and that is the economy, the social, and the ecological. These three, also the environment, these three arms are key, but they must work together.
Okay. Thank you very much, Charlotte Kirk, for being with us on the show today. One thing that struck me that you said is about integral solutions. So it's not just enough to do technology. We must integrate with other things to ensure that we have sustainable tourism all over the world, and particularly for Africa. It also improves the tourist experience, which would make the tourists to come back, and will have a boom in the tourism sector all across Africa. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. We've enjoyed your contributions so much.
Thank you. And I know an example in Abuja where they're already trying to do some of it, at least in a restaurant, because restaurants also it belongs to the tourism scene. At High Taste, for instance, they have solar cells and they separate plastic and plastic waste and, you know, the bottles, etc. And these are low-hanging fruits. It's just an example, but these things can happen and are going on out there. A lot of things are already being done. We just have to scale it.
Okay.
So, and get everyone on board and talk to each other.
All right. Thank you very much. I know that those who are in the tourist business are listening. They've watched the show, and everyone will do their part because it's a collective action. You may not be in the tourism business, but you may be a tourist. So collectively, we can do this. And that's how we wrap up that discussion. We're going to break and look at other aspects of tourism.
According to a report by the World Travel and Tourism Council's WTTC Economic Impact Research 2023, it shows that travel and tourism is returning to its 2019 peak, recovering more than 95%. The sector is projected to reach $9.5 trillion, or 5% deep below the pre-pandemic levels when travel was at its highest. Similarly, analysts at this year's Economist Intelligence Unit predict a 30% rise in global tourism, with border restrictions being lifted. However, it is important for nations to manage tourism sustainably to avoid negative impact on the environment and culture while maximizing economic benefits. Medical tourism, for instance, is a fast-growing sector of economic growth and diversification, and many countries are already benefiting from it, although that is not in the case of countries like Nigeria, which had spent a total of $1.04 million on foreign healthcare related services in the first quarter of 2023, according to quarterly statistical bulletin of the Central Bank of Nigeria. In the light of the recent experiences by merchants, global travel in 2023 will definitely take a different outlook, and for many countries, including Nigeria, to benefit from these, there are certain sustainable tourism practices they have to adapt. These practices, which aim to create a harmonious relationship between tourism and the environment, society and culture, while providing a meaningful and enjoyable experience for tourists. In order for tourism industry to contribute positively to both current and future well-being, government at every level, local communities, tourism businesses, and even the tourists themselves will have to work together. Nigeria, like many other countries, could partake in the immense benefits in this industry. But would we be willing to put in the required work necessary to sustain this practice? Juvi Ufiene, Suk News.
Thank you, Juvie Ofiene, for adding to the conversation on tourism. We took a look at sustainable tourism in the first half of the discussion, and in this half, we're looking at cultural tourism, which essentially is just a subset of what is called tourism as a whole. What is cultural tourism? It is the way people from all over the world interact with the culture, with the heritage, with the art and crafts of some other people in the name of tourism. Essentially, I would say that tourism is all about getting to interact with the culture of a new place, because you are there in the first place to explore new possibilities, to see new things, to experience the world in a new way. And so we talk about, paying visits to heritage sites. We talk about participating in art and performances, and Africa is very, very rich in art and performances. We don't have, we don't come last in these things. And of course, the culinary experiences. When some of us travel, that is one of those things we look forward to taste new dishes and delight our palate beyond what we're used to, beyond our own local flavors. All these elements constitute what we call cultural heritage. I knew you would say something about food to me now, because I mentioned.
Well, that is you judging yourself, because I wasn't going to say anything about that.
You were thinking, and I was hearing your thoughts.
Oh, really? Well, you can't separate culinary experience from cultural tourism, because when you experience the culture of people, food is part of the culture of people, and so you want to also experience their food, where you different cuisines will be served to people. So it's a fun part of tourism, unlike some kind of tourism that is not so fun. But cultural tourism is for those who are really adventurous, those who really want to learn about other people. Now, bringing it down to Nigeria, there are different parts of our culture that are fascinating, not just to foreigners, but even to ourselves, because we have different cultures in Nigeria. Take, for instance, the Osun Festival. That garners lots of tourists, but locally and internationally, people want to see what the culture of the Yoruba people is about, which is what the Osun Festival really embodies. People want to see how it is done. And so you have people coming to watch that, and they interact also with the people. At the time, we had Beyonce, international music artist Beyonce, coming to be a part of the Osun Festival. So these are some of the things that cultural tourism brings about. People of different culture coming to just experience the culture of other people.
Essentially, beyond that, cultural tourism also helps to preserve, the culture of other places. One of the good things that have happened to mankind now is that we are in a free world now, where no culture is trying to dominate another culture. So, when you promote cultural tourism, you essentially preserve the culture of the locale where you are there as a tourist. And apart from that, it promotes economic growth for the residents locality, because when people come, there is a huge inflow of income, diaspora remittances, essentially, when people come from other parts of the world to your own country, all in the name of cultural tourism. And of course, there is cross-cultural understanding. A simple experiment was conducted. A group of people were put in a room, a group of native Indians were put in a room. They were asked what would they need to collect to bury their dead. They said no, because in their climate, they eat their dead. Then a group of Native Americans were put elsewhere, and then someone there said, what would I have to give you to eat your dead? To them, it was abominable, meaning one man's culture is another man's abomination. But then when we have cultural tourism and we create a solid foundation for understanding, and we educate, like Coach said earlier, we educate, like Charles rather said earlier, we educate the tourists or the would-be tourists on the essence of our culture, then we are able to tolerate one another, and we don't see that one culture is actually subservient to another culture. That's just one of the benefits.
Yes,
there.
and going back to the economic side, the economic gains of cultural tourism, it gives the opportunity for artisans, those who are in the craft, to display their wares. There are different designs, different arts that are created that ordinarily, without you having tourists coming, the artisans or the artists may not even have the opportunity to sell off some of these things. But when tourists go to different places, maybe for cultural, particularly for cultural tourism, they want to take home souvenirs, things that represent the culture that they've been to, things that could show back home, or when they get home to people and say, oh, I got this from this country, I got this from this culture, this means this means that. So a lot of economic activity go on, and it's a beneficial season when artists, those craftsmen, artisans have lots of tourists come in to their area.
And of course, we mustn't forget the place of, education. When I say education, cultural tourism actually broadens the mind. Like I said earlier, the world in cultural tourism. If you are in Osogbo, Osun State, at the point where they're celebrating the Osun Osogbo Festival, you see a lot of branding here and there. Companies all over the world take advantage of this because, at that point in time, Osogbo or Osun State becomes the signature of the global eyes. And because many eyes are actually feasting on Osogbo at that point in time, those who are smart in business take advantage of that, and they brand the destination. And that brings a lot of income, even from the point of, viewership online or on TV.
Yes, and there is cultural preservation, because when these cultures are being visited, it gives the people the sense that, oh, people like what we are, or we need to continue in this, particularly when economic gains begin to accrue. And so they preserve the culture. It is something that doesn't die out, because it has made, it has brought attention to the community or the area where such culture prevails. And so that culture becomes preserved. It's passed on from one generation to another. But there are challenges with cultural tourism. Some of them is that when people begin to come into a particular area, like Ayo just talked about, there are certain places that are sacred. There are certain places that tourists cannot just get into or enter like that. But that sometimes people do not do what is expected. They only do what is inspected. And there, where no form of inspection is provided, maybe through a tour guide or something, some people violate some of those places, and it becomes a problem looking at the sacredness of those places. The people of that area may feel like such places have been desecrated because people who were not permitted had entrance or access to that area. We'll talk more about this after this break. Don't go anywhere. We're talking about cultural tourism. Stay tuned. All right, thanks for staying tuned. We're still looking at cultural tourism. If you just joined us, we've looked at some aspects of cultural tourism. We'll talk about the heritage side. We'll talk about art and performance, which cultural tourism opens the door for more of it. You can talk about cultural tourism without talking about art and performance. You would have sometimes some festivals go hand in hand with some of those things, and there will be performance, maybe cultural dance, cultural trips performing, and You also have art, where we talked about some artifacts, some artworks that would be on display, which some cultural tourists want to buy and take home as souvenirs. We've looked extensively at the economic gains that accrue to communities where we have lots of cultural tourism activities or even centers. And we've talked about also branding, companies taking advantage of this and wanting to also expose their brand, sponsor cultural activities in certain communities. And now we're talking about challenges of cultural tourism.
One of the challenges is actually what we call cultural modification, where tradition becomes commoditized in the real sense of it. Before now, maybe a lot of people did not really know the economic value of some of these tourist centers. But then, having encountered how it is done elsewhere in the world, nations all over the world are intentionally bringing a lot of attention to their cultural heritage, which is not bad in itself. But then some would argue that we are kind of desecrating the sensitivity of our cultural heritage because we have commoditized it. And I like to crack a particular joke. When a European enters a typical African shrine, he doesn't see gods anyway. He sees works of art. He sees bronze, he sees sculpture, and it can be very touchy. When an African enters another place, he sees gods. That is a difference, a very marked difference there. So that's one of the challenges there. Some people believe we have commoditized our culture. Well, it is not bad as some people will see it, because the whole idea of culture is for it to shape lives and to impact meanings. And if you cannot export your own ideology through your own culture to other people, then you are doing yourself a disservice. That's just one of it.
Yeah, talking about commodifying culture, it's part of the reason why some communities or some cultures have closed the door to their culture, even when they have a lot to give out in terms of making it a tourist attraction, bringing in people. They do not want to have their culture or some aspect of their culture exposed to people who are not natively from that culture. But I think there's a way to go about it. There are areas that you could leave out. There are areas you could open up to people to see. And talking about it being an ideology, because ideology is part of the way people rule, people influence others. Now, you can even expose that ideology to other people and bringing other people into your culture. So there are several ways to go about it, where you don't necessarily commodify your culture, but you expose it to people and then you make gains from it while also preserving it. There are areas you could leave out where people may not have access to, so they do not desecrate places that are considered to be sacred.
Okay, so to join the conversation via Zoom is Lefeyu Grill, who is a tourism and hotel management lecturer, University of Bamenda in Cameroon. Good morning, Mr. Grill.
Good morning.
Yes, good to have you join us here. Thank you. Now, let's talk about the place of cultural tourism in preserving the heritage of a place. How does it happen? Did you hear me? Okay, seems to have frozen there. I was about asking. Okay, you can hear me.
It actually got broken.
Okay.
I couldn't.
Okay, let me repeat myself.
What you said.
Okay, let me tell you. Now, how does cultural tourism, help to preserve the heritage of the locale where this tourism takes place? What is the interaction between preservation of culture and cultural tourism?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on set. I want to actually say cultural tourism is a very vital aspect when it comes to preservation of our culture. Now, because these are elements, ideologies, perceptions, and art that has been transferred from generation to generation, and it is a kind of an artistic manner to identify the things that are common with a particular people, and it defines them. So it becomes a tool of preservation of what their identity really is. So that's the relationship between cultural tourism and preservation, because the art, the norms, the identity of a people is being preserved through cultural tourism or through enhancements in cultural tourism.
What are the strategies that destinations or locale where we have some very attractive culture, how can they achieve a balance between tourism and also the demands to protect cultural assets?
Yes, I think one of the things that happens with us so often is the fact that we stage our culture in order to make it visible in tourism fairs. But there is need for us to understand that the reason why we should be able to maintain the elements of cultural tourism is because the person who is coming to identify with our culture has probably seen elements of it that are of interest and wants to have full understanding on what dimensions that these are. So when it comes to striking a balance between the whole aspect of cultural tourism, we look at it from the perspective where elements that can be appealing to the visual identity of this people, of a group of people, or a society or a nation, can be sold out to others so that they have an appreciation of what these people are, what are their beliefs, what are the things that hold dear to them, and how does it define who they are.
Now, some do say that there is this concept of over-commercialization of tourism, especially cultural tourism. Do you believe, really, that cultural tourism can be over-commercialized? And if you do, what can we do to still preserve the identity, the sanctity of our culture in the face of over-commercialization of it?
Well, yes, that is very true. Cultural tourism is over-commercialized, especially when a particular group of people decide to do multiple cultural events to showcase their identity. And when this is brandished world over, and it becomes a kind of, how do I put it? It becomes a kind of a national event or an event that calls attention. We reach a point where we cannot be able to deliver a lot of what the culture is. Then we start trying to camouflage it. Now, the over-commercialization comes when you look at, if you want to do a cultural event to showcase your identity, there is the gastronomic part, there is the museology, or there is the artistic exhibitions. All of this can be done in a single environment or through a single fair. When it is spread through individual or independent sectors, it leads to this whole aspect of over-commercialization. One of the ways we can be able to curb this is to identify the various aspects of cultural tourism, group them, and sell them out as packages, not repeating them in communities that have a similar kind of a culture. For example, in Cameroon, if we have villages that are connected to each other doing cultural festivals almost simultaneously, it will lead to this whole aspect of over-commercialization, because there are lots of these elements that are common or similar to each other. What then do we do? There is a bright side of over-commercialization, which is wanting to create an impact with sending forth the identity of a people, especially those that are marginalized. But on the other hand, when it is overdone, it reduces the attention that this can get. And so it makes the level of appreciation to diminish. So the value that that culture has becomes diminished.
All right, so how can...
Hello. Okay, we'll get back to that. I was about asking the steps countries in the world, especially Africa, can do post-pandemic to, reboost that particular sector. Like I just read out some statistics there. In 2021, we had 518,000 tourists in Nigeria, which was a decrease from what happened in 2020. Of course, we know that the COVID-19 outbreak was responsible because the entire world was shut down or locked in. And then now, it's been 3 years or 2 years on the aggregate since the end, so to speak, or the control of COVID-19. So what do we do as a people to still boost, cultural tourism? And what we are doing today is probably one of those steps we can take: media exposure. When we talk about it here on this platform, then others will know that, okay, let us continue with that. Okay, I have it that my guest is back. Mr. Cyril, welcome back. Can you hear me? Okay.
Right there.
All right, thank you. So I just reeled out a set of statistics from Nigeria here that showed that.
I think before the connection got lost, we were talking about the impact of COVID-19.
Essentially, yes. So you can speak to that. What do we do post-COVID to boost cultural tourism?
Yes, I think COVID-19 played a very, very measured role negatively on the whole aspect of cultural tourism, because a lot of events were cancelled as a result of the measures, the barrier measures of COVID-19. Well, notwithstanding, in areas where revenue was generated from the organization of such events, there was actually a backdrop. But recently, in recent times, lots of these events have actually been reorganized. And in Cameroon, for example, we've had lots of cultural festivals coming up. We've had lots of heritage sites being opened. Museums are opening for public consumption. And well, the impact is being felt again positively, even though it had reduced us to a point where interaction was limited and organization of cultural festivals and gatherings as such was actually impeded by the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it had a very negative effect on lots of communities, especially those who depend a lot on organizing such cultural festivals, gastronomic festivals, and all of that.
All right, so what initiatives would help destinations secure the engagement of the tourists in cultural activities, in the local traditions?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to be able to look at is we must identify, the communities concerned should identify what they want to project. What is it about our culture that we want to showcase? What part of it are we comfortable sending out to the world, to the public? What do we want people to identify us with? By the time we identify this, we will be able to go to the next step of looking at the dimensions that these elements we have identified can be showcased. Now, we must be able to equally
All right, we were talking about engaging the tourists in the local traditions, because if they're not engaged, someone could visit a particular cultural destination for tourism, and they may not just be impressed and not want to return. You know how if you have people who return and also bring others, that increases the viability of that destination.
Yes, he mentioned something earlier when he was, fielding questions from us, that it is important for the local community to determine what they want to project, really. So when you want to go to the next stage of engaging visitors or tourists to your country, then you must define at what level you want to engage them. How deep do you want to take them? Because, you know, Africa in particular is rooted, I mean the traditional Africa, not the modern day Africa that has been, you know, westernized. The core Africa is rooted in mythologies and a lot of rituals. That is tradition for us here. Now, when you bring outsiders to come and engage with your culture
at that
level, then you have to decide how far they can go, really. Okay, Mr. Cyril, you're back on track. All right. So, I want you to speak. Okay, oh dear. It's okay. It's fine. We'll just go on and we'll see. So when you bring in people to your culture, like I was saying, you must define the limits for them. Decide what you want them to engage in, so that they don't touch the touch nuts, if there are any touch nuts, and they don't just go beyond their bounds. And that is where you said tourist guides come into play there. Just that when you see tourist guides in some climes, they really are not doing. They become tourists themselves. They are meant to be your guide, but they get fascinated by the hard currency that you bring on board.
Especially at cultural events where you have lots of performances, masquerade displays and all, so they get carried away, and sometimes it may not be enough, because when you talk about cultural tourism, it involves the attraction of lots of people, and sometimes the events are usually crowded. So having one guard or maybe some tour guard to man the place and to actually tell people what to do, what not to do, can be problematic. So there are different ways that these communications can be passed across, rather than just depend on having people to guide other persons who are visitors to say, oh, this is the way to go, this is where you can stay. You could have signs at every place, signs that can be understood. Now, this is where the Ministry of Tourism of every country has a role to play, providing data. Now, for anyone who is visiting a country or a destination for tourism, sometimes they indicate the kind of tourism they're there to do, or when they get to a particular place and they come into a community, through the hotels, through where they stay, maybe restaurants that they visit, you could collate information to know where they've come from, so you know in what language that you can communicate. But there are signs that typically, without you necessarily saying anything, could pass a message to people. For instance, the danger sign. When you place that danger sign at places where you do not want people to enter, maybe because if they touch what they are not supposed to touch, there are repercussions, regardless of the race, that could go along with such things. You could put a sign there so they understand, oh, it is dangerous to go into such places. Now, if the language, you assume that you're getting people from a certain language, maybe English, you could also write that in English. So there are things that can be done that bring to the consciousness of people that, oh, I can't do this here, I can't do that here. You could put a barricade, maybe where there are monuments, where there are particular artifacts that people can see. You could put a barricade so they can actually observe and not get in contact with some of these things.
And of course, we shouldn't forget the place of security in all of these. While we were growing up, we read Mr. Baku and family that traveled from one part of Nigeria to almost every part of Nigeria. Those were the days when security was still taken for granted. I am not very sure if Baku and family make the journey now, they'll go very far beyond the middle belt before something happens somewhere. So we have to ensure that we secure our people. We provide that environment, okay, and we provide the enabling environment. And security is top-notch. People will not come to you if they don't feel secure here. And that is very important. We want to apologize to the viewers because the network set up there at the Cameroonian end was a bit down while we're having that conversation. I want to say thank you to Mr. Cyril for spending time with us. The few minutes you spent were enlightening for us, and I would have loved to ask you about cultural exchange. I want to bring you to Nigeria here and probably have this lady beside me come to Cameroon for some kind of cultural tourism. But then, we can still go to that conversation behind closed doors later. Okay, let's go on a very short break. Now, you want to respond to that? You want to go to Cameroon? Okay.
What is wrong with going to Cameroon? Now, Cyril can also come to Nigeria.
Definitely.
And we can just have some exchange.
Okay, we're on a break now. When we return, we'll look at film tourism. Yeah, I know you just said, yeah, many of you are film tourists. So let's see what it is when we come back from this break. Don't go away. Thank you.
Whenever your mind and your body are not together in any place, on anything you're doing, you can never be optimal. Why do some people excel way beyond expectation? Some just cut it, and some fall way behind. And I think it's not that some were born more intelligent than others. It's the attitude that one brings to whatever they're doing. Whatever you're doing, if you are not fully engaged in mind and body, then you are not optimally imbibing. You want to go to the movies. You start getting ready at home, but your mind is at the movies. So you get to the movie only to realize that you've forgotten your movie ticket at home. Now that you're at the movie, a movie of 2 hours, 1 hour and a half into the movie, your mind is to the next place, outside the movie. So before the movie credit starts rolling out, everybody is standing up and blocking your view and everybody is rushing out. You are in a training and you have your phone beside you. As it's beeping, you are checking it and you believe that you are listening and imbibing. You are not fooling anybody, you are fooling yourself. Because you are imbibing nothing. You cannot serve two masters. Sometimes the usage of time is also important. When we wake up in the morning, what do? Significant people wake up in their most productive mind. They solve a problem, they take in creative items, or they write something inspirational. Now, when you wake up and you are at the beck and call of reaction, you read a mail, you react to it. You see a WhatsApp message, you react to it. You react to social media posts. You are not making the optimum use of your most creative energies at the most creative time of the day. When you wake up in the morning, I would say, do something inspirational, imbibe something inspirational, write something inspirational, solve a big problem in your mind. Nothing is going to fall down if you don't check your emails and your WhatsApp until 10 o'clock. Put the phone away, not inside, and check it again at 12 o'clock. Put it away, not inside, check it again at 2 o'clock, and check it again at 4 o'clock. There was a time when I was growing up when all we had were landlines. And it's only when you are at the phone and it rings that you pick it up, and nobody died. Be more assertive with your time. Make the most of what you're doing. Wherever you're doing, whatever you're doing, be there fully in mind and body, and see how significant you will be.
Thank you very much, Austin Okere, for those wonderful tips. They are indeed valuable. Now let's continue the discussion on tourism. So another subset of the tourism industry is film tourism. Now this is a type of tourism that involves the visit of destinations that are seen in movies and television shows. And to a great extent, those those who are into the film industry, cinematographers have a great role to play, because there are some scenes that you see, oh, you just love the location, you love the site, you love the story that was associated with it, and some fans want to actually connect with them physically. It becomes the next place to visit, and so they go just to have that connection, that touch with it. There are also some places that are associated, very popular with maybe movie production, for instance, Hollywood. Some persons want to visit Hollywood to see how it is and just connect with some of those things. This is what we're looking at. And we have a screenwriter, broadcast producer, the person of Efefiong Akpan with us, and he will be joining us via Zoom shortly. But before that, let me ask Ayer, I know that you like watching movies. Are there particular places, particular scenes you've seen, particular locations, and you've thought to yourself, I would like to visit this place. I'd like to see what it looks like physically. And maybe there was one character or a movie that actually makes you want to connect with that.
Well, essentially, my response will be localized to my personal experience, because I wouldn't talk about Hollywood yet. Let's talk about our own Nollywood. While we were growing up, Ocean Grove was always in the movies, one way or the other. And there is this suspended bridge in Ocean Grove. The first time I set my feet on that particular grove, I went to that bridge exactly to see if it was really suspended. And yes, it is suspended. That is one example. And some of our, I don't want to call them local stars, some of our indigenous stars while growing up, well, let's say Baba one day back then. Of course, I went to his house, and I didn't meet him at home, but at some point we came in contact with each other. So I met him. So it is true that sometimes as a film tourist, you want to go to those places that you see in movies, and you want to meet those faces and see that they are even as human as you are. Of course, we have Efefiong ready for us. He is a screenwriter and is a broadcast producer. Efefiong Akpan, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning for having me. Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Okay, let's start with the impact of film tourism on local economy. Can you speak to that as an opener?
Well, basically, film is about making money. And when you use properties and locations to shoot movies, you're actually calling on people to come and see what you use to shoot the movie. So people pay money as tourists to come to film sites that you had used in the movie. And when they pay money as tourists to come, they pay gate fees and all that, So it enriches the local economy and promotes national economy.
So what factor influences the choice of destination? Is it the popularity of the site, or how beautiful it looked? What factors?
If you're in Nollywood, they might have used some locations for making movies in Nigeria. But beyond Nollywood, if you go to places like Casablanca, go to Serengeti, go to Namibia, and well, let me localize it. If, say, for example, Budukato Ranch, Mambila Plateau, all those kind of things. Imagine that you have all those tourism sites in movies, and they actually enhance the visual aesthetics and the storytelling. Then you will know what tourists would want to come and see. They will be attracted by the very spectacle that the camera would use to tell stories. So, bottom line is that tourism sites are basically attractions to tourists when they're well used in movies and stories.
Okay, let me ask this, because you are a film producer. In recent times, maybe by the demand of Netflix on indigenous producers, you see some of our film producers now coming up with, they are literally creating cities for their movies. We saw that in Anikulapo, and even in the recent Jagun Jagun that has been released, they had to go as far as constructing that particular war scene. After the movies are produced, are they retained in that locality to become tourist centers, or they just dismantled? After all, they've served their purpose.
Unfortunately, some might be dismantled, but if you take somebody like Afoloyan, he's been able to set up a film village somewhere in the southwest. So If it sustains that for subsequent shoots, it becomes a tourist attraction for the average tourist, maybe from America, from Europe, maybe from Asia, who wants to see what was reflected in the story that he used those constructions for. Because sometimes there are two kinds of locations: the natural ones and the ones you build. You usually have carpenters and all that, builders that actually build scenes in movies. So it is left for you to decide whether you're going to reuse those sites or locations again, or you're gonna have to dismantle and rebuild for another story. So, but when you have natural sites, like take for example the Bukato Ranch, the Oshun Oshobo that you talked about, Yankari Game Reserve. If you pretend your stories to those sites, of course you don't have to dismantle. These are natural sites that people will always come back to see. So if we as Nigerians want to grow our tourist economy, that's where we can invest. That's where we can preserve. That's where we can promote. That's where we can attract people to come, pay money, and see what we have.
Okay, some of these natural sites, what practices can ensure that they're preserved? Because, for instance, the person has seen how beautiful the Obudukatu Ranch is and wants to visit the place, only to find that it's a shadow of what they've seen.
Well, that's left for us as a people. We like going abroad. We go to Dubai, we go to Europe, we go to all kinds of places internationally. But one thing that is left for Nigerians, apart from just using such sites for movies, is for us to make efforts to preserve what we have. Ecological destruction in Nigeria is not a new thing. Ecological abuse is not a new thing in Nigeria. But I think if we begin to think about making money from such sites, then we should consciously enable them look attractive. And one of the ways to do so is for maybe people in the tourism industry and the film industry and even the government to have a dialogue on such sites and be able to say, okay, can we create a film village here? Can we do this and that? Then we'll consciously preserve those sites, whether it is for filmmaking, whether it is for tourism, just tourism alone. Then it becomes a sustainable project for anybody to use in the maybe tourism, hospitality, filmmaking, conferences, and all that. So it is left for us as a people to consciously agree that we must build our sites just like they built Dubai, just like they built Hawaii, just like they built several places all over the world for people to go touring and pay money to make money for the local economy, and of course attract more and more revenue to the country. If you take film, for example, Nollywood has been able to strike a balance between oil and gas. Let's put it that way. Wow. I would say if as Netflix comes into Nigeria, we are discovering another oil and gas. So what do we do with this oil and gas? Do we consciously look at the economic chain, and say, okay, we're going to invest in our sites, we're going to invest in the equipment, we're going to do several things that will build those sites, build tourism, build filmmaking, build film culture. I mean, build stories that we can tell, because whether we like it or not, we have not harvested, would I say, a tenth of our potential to tell the world our stories. I can imagine a situation where we consciously do story conferences, we consciously tie story conferences to tourist sites and encourage filmmakers to make movies out of those sites. Then you can imagine what will happen.
Okay, I like the fact that you just drew that parallel between oil and gas and the arrival of the likes of Netflix. You are saying film tourism or filmmaking has become the new oil and gas in Nigeria. Okay, let me agree with you there. Take us behind the scenes, because one of the complaints of locales where oil is explored is that the members there are often ignored in critical conversations. How much of engagement do you do with locales when you go to shoot? What is the interaction like? Are they part of the stakeholders you consider when you get there, or is just, okay, we've paid you for this and we're just doing our thing and going away?
I don't know if you've heard the term omonile that has been disturbing filmmakers. You go to locations to shoot movies, and out of the thin air, you see boys coming around you demanding that you pay certain fees for you to be able to shoot on locations. If you go to other countries, developed film industries, city councils, states actually have incentive where they give to filmmakers to make movies. And part of the incentive is to collect tax. Do rebate on taxation, give you a little bit of taxation where you pay, and those benefits will go back to the council or the county or the state. So when we start talking about oil and gas as in film, if we consciously, like I said before, if we consciously, because we're not consciously doing anything. I'll give you an example. If we take the movie industry, we are not organized. So we need to organize ourselves in the movie industry to make demands on government to do certain things that would, benefit the filmmaker, the storyteller, and the locals. So that, for example, if I go to shoot in Niger Delta, like they will go to Niger Delta to mine oil and gas, I should be able to know what tax I'm paying to benefit the local population. If, for example, you go to a library where the first oil well in Nigeria was dug, and you make that an object of storytelling, then you make that a tourist attraction, and you tell a story around that oil well. Take, for example, the story of Isaac Burrow that has not been told yet. If you make conscious effort to make that chain of events become, beneficial to locals and the industry, then you've struck a balance. That's what we don't do in Nigeria. We don't consciously key into these elements, this chain, to ensure that everybody benefits. So how will the locals not disturb you, asking you to pay maybe what you call illegal tax?
Okay, let's look at the economic benefits of film tourism. Now, by screening some particular locations, what the film industry is giving is free promotion of the destination site. So when the economic benefits come, or does it,
yes,
has Nollywood really benefited economically from film tourism, or it is just the destinations that are benefiting? And when the benefits come, do the locals even know that these benefits came as a result of the locations being used in films to actually attribute the gains to the film industry?
I said before now that we don't consciously key into this chain. If you consciously key into this chain, and Nollywood will benefit, the state will benefit, locals will benefit. So we need to consciously, if I could, can you rewind your question again? So let me just get it.
Okay, I asked two questions in one. One of them is, has Nollywood actually benefited economically from film tourism, promoting some sites that they've used in movies, which now draws some tourists to want to visit those sites? Has Nollywood benefited, or it is just the destinations that are benefiting? And even when the destinations benefit, do they realize that these benefits came as a result of the destinations being used in movies to attribute the gains to the film industry?
I'll tell you what a South African, truly Nigerian filmmaker. He said, you guys make movies in Lagos, and Nigeria is supposed to be the largest filmmaker or filmmaking country in Africa, perhaps the third or the second in the world. And he said, you guys shoot movies and you shoot in Lagos. I don't know anything about Lagos. You don't show me landscape. You don't show me where locals live. You don't actually show, I don't know anything about Lagos just watching your movies. So I go back to the word conscious. Conscious in the sense that if you consciously say you're going to do this, you will do it, and everybody will benefit. Imagine if storytellers, screenwriters, producers, directors intend, as it were, to actually tell the Nigerian story, which is attracting filmmakers, studios, streamers all over the world, to Nigeria today. Imagine if we consciously key into a situation where we need to, or we have to tell our stories to the extent that we can actually use sites and consciously know that everybody is a factor. Everybody is a factor in the game. Everybody is a factor, is an element, is an unavoidable factor in the game. Then we will know what to benefit, what to create, because we must create wealth in that chain, then who will benefit from that change? So Nollywood will be able to say, okay, this is how much of our culture or tourism site we've reflected. And therefore, we'll be able to attract, like I said, people to know where they shoot, to understand what they're shooting. I'm not saying Nollywood is not doing anything about, using sites, but have we consciously enabled a situation where we can harvest from such sites so that everybody will benefit? Because if we take Serengeti, the Americans in the 60s used to go to Serengeti to shoot movies in East Africa. What happened? They opened up the tourism site. And so the local economy benefited, local people got employed, and everything happened. So that should also happen in Nigeria. As long as we don't consciously enable that chain to work, I don't see how anybody can really benefit. That's my take.
Okay, now let me speak to the screenwriter part of you, apart from you being a producer. I do know that if you read the likes of Thomas Hardy's literature works or literary works, even locations can be a character in storytelling. Have there been instances where location changed the course of storytelling for you as a writer?
I also teach screenwriting and storytelling. I often tell my students that one of the things that can revolutionize Nigerian storytelling for filmmaking will be for you to begin to consciously understand why your location is important in your storytelling. Because if you take a priest to a brothel, and if a priest goes to a brothel to preach to a prostitute, and he happens to come out, and his neighbor sees him, suddenly there will be conflict. There will be a cast of bad reputation on the priest. If we take a prostitute to become perhaps a worship leader in a church, you immediately understand that there will be conflict. And so location can become a character in the sense that if anybody comes to Lagos, a lot of people come to Lagos to make money. They come to Lagos because Lagos, as it were, in the years back, was supposed to yield. As soon as you come, you can make money in Lagos. So you can come to Lagos and get change. The same thing happens to any story. Location impacts story. So location can become a character in the story and impact on the protagonist or the main character. Yes.
Beyond making the audience or the fans of a movie who have seen different locations, who have seen different sites in the movie, want to visit that site, what other film-related experience can the destination offer to connect the visitors or the tourists more with the destination and even the movie?
If I understand you, you're asking if I use a certain site in my movies, would that site, retain its reputation, promote the movie, and still return visitors? Is that what you mean?
Okay, what I'm asking is this. When we talked about some film tourist sites, you talked about some of them being natural and some others not actually being natural. Some of them were constructed, made because of the particular movie that you wanted to shoot. Now, for instance, I've seen some of that sites, maybe the ones that were created, how you create villages and you put in some other things mixed with the natural site. And I want to visit that particular location. What other thing is there to engage me and want to make me even return beyond me just saying, oh, this is the place I saw in a movie, this is how it is? Are there other things there to make my experience a quality one?
Anyway, recently I saw in a news item about an American who came to Africa, and I think he actually arrived in Nigeria. And beyond just coming to Nigeria, the American thought, look, I could come to Nigeria and live in Nigeria. And if we take the tourism attraction, the place where they used to sell slaves in Ghana, somewhere in Ghana, forgotten the name of the place. A lot of Americans, especially African Americans, go there, and the memories of their ancestors who were sold into slavery, would flood back. So beyond tourism, there is the aspect of spirituality. There's the aspect of health. You go to a tourism place beyond just seeing the tourism because the tourism site because you saw it on a movie. You can get relaxed. You can you might want to say, okay, I'm going to come back not just to come see this site, but to come back and see Nigeria as a wholesome location. For example, if somebody went to Mambila Plateau and probably Mambila was used in the movie, he or she went there to see Mambila Plateau and perhaps has money to invest. The person might say, okay, I saw tea plantation, viable tea plantation in Mambila. I think I will come back and invest in Mambila. That's what filmmaking does. That's what film tourism does. It takes you beyond the mere fact that you came to see an attraction. It takes you beyond the mere fact that you came to relive the story you saw on the screen. So it could actually make you come back and say, I want to come back to my roots. I want to invest in a certain location. I love the people. They are friendly. They are warm. I want to come back and live there. That sort of thing could happen. That becomes personalized. So beyond that group tour, beyond sightseeing, there could be spiritual reawakening. There could be, reinvention of your humanity to say, okay, I'm coming back to Africa.
Now, for the sites that you use sometimes, could there be relics of the film itself that connect the people? Maybe pictures, maybe inscriptions, paintings, that once you get there, it's very easy for you to connect. Oh, this movie was shot here, and you see pictures of it, you see things like that. Have we come to that level?
In Nigeria, no.
Yes.
I will guarantee we have not come to that level. Why is that happening? Because many times you hear stories about Nollywood movies being wishy-washy. Not anymore, because movies are improving. The problem with that is that storytellers, screenwriters don't do deep research. Let me give out a secret that has helped me in recent times. If you ask an average writer in Nigeria, have you used AI? You say, no, I don't know how to use AI. But I tell you what, ever since AI came to be somewhat popular in Nigeria, AI has reduced my workload by 2/3 of what I used to do. It is a question of being involved in your job, being ready and loving your job so that you write a good story. Sometimes I read 3 files, internet files to write one scene. Writers in Nigeria hate doing that. Why? Because indeed we are not being encouraged. How would we be encouraged? One of the ways to be encouraged is to hold story conferences, which I've advocated the industry for a long time. I've done this advocacy. We need to hold story conferences. Now, the studios in America and Europe or wherever they're coming from, even from China coming into Nigeria to reap or to harvest stories, can we have regional story conferences? And one of the things that would surely be portrayed in those regional story conferences is to begin to visit our tourism site, see what stories we can harvest from those sites. Yes, therefore, in doing so, relics, whatever you find on those sites, will become story-making tools. If you take a place like Calabar, where you have the first, the colonial office, you take a place like Arochukwu, where you have Ibn Pabio, where slaves used to be, sold off. There's this story about people, telling you, I want to go and sacrifice somebody to Ibn Pabio. They will go and sacrifice goats and sell off human beings into slavery. These are great stories.
All right.
There are stories around us.
Thank you very much.
Hello?
Apologies, we just have to end it here. I really appreciate you for all this, but I have two take-home or two takeaways from this segment. Number one, You just told me that your workload has been reduced by 2/3. So when I'm engaging you next time, I'll cut your pay by 2/3 because you can't give me 1/3 work and collect full money. Yeah, you told us with your own mouth here. Let's just settle that. Then secondly, I like the fact that you spoke about regional story conferences. But beyond that, you should be looking at collaborative film production as producers in Nigeria here so that you don't operate in silos again. There is so much we can do together as film producers in Nigeria if we come together. Thank you very much for that. God bless you.
Thank you.
All right, we go on a short break now. When we return, we take a look at medical tourism. Yes, this will evoke some reactions in some people here, but that is the next phase of the conversation after this break. Don't go anywhere.
All right, finally, let's look at medical tourism. Now, the practice of seeking medical care from one country, one continent to the other has seen substantial growth. Now, this involves an interplay of different factors ranging from technological advancement to specialized care and a host of other things. Now, you should note that Nigeria spends an estimation of $1.2 to $1.6 billion on medical tourism every year. Now, the different reasons why Nigerians embark on medical tourism, one of them, like I mentioned earlier, is technological advancement, specialized care, convenience, and even the wait time that people spend at hospitals is part of the reasons why Nigerians embark on medical tourism. Now, the following countries are popular destinations for medical tourism from Nigeria. We have India, we have Thailand, we have Turkey, Malaysia, and Singapore. The most common medical procedures sought by medical tourists from Nigeria are cosmetic surgery. We have fertility treatment, heart surgery, kidney transplant, and cancer treatment. Joining us via Zoom to talk about this is Nancy Abdulhadi, who is Director, International Relations, FACO Pharmaceuticals, Egypt, CEO, and IBIS. So we'll look at all of that when we bring in Nancy. But first, looking at some of the reasons why Nigerians embark on medical tourism, technological advancement, specialized care. How does that make you feel as a Nigerian?
It's a sad commentary. It is a sad commentary. Yeah, we've spoken so glowingly about other types of, tourism. We spoke glowingly about film tourism. We spoke about sustainable tourism, and we even looked at the third part of it, cultural tourism. These were on the bright side of the discussion, but when you look at medical tourism, for us as Nigerians, I said it's a sad commentary because it underscores one fact, that we have not made enough investment of resources in our medical research, and we are not able to take care of our own people. The local technology in terms of healthcare is not being developed. Like you just read out, between 1.2 and 1.6 billion dollars is spent every year by Nigerians on medical tourism. I think the word medical tourism is nothing but a euphemism. It is not tourism in any way, because tourism is meant to be for you to go somewhere and enjoy what you don't have.
It's supposed to be fun.
But this is not fun. You are going there for, life saving. People who have issues with their kidney go to India for kidney transplant, and so on and so forth. For us as a country, and for Africa as a continent, we have so much more to do. We are always on this giving side of the equation. We are the ones going there to spend the little that we have as against promoting others coming to spend the much that they have here. What happens to us here developing our own local technology health-wise? And we do not lack the capacity mental-wise, because even when you go to the USA or some other parts of the Western world, you will see that Nigerian doctors are doing fine there.
Yeah, which brings us to specialized care. So I think it is a thing of where the specialized doctors or the specialized medical medical experts are located, not a thing about the country they're from. Because we've talked about the issue of brain drain being a real problem, particularly in the health sector. Like you just mentioned, we have a lot of Nigerian doctors who have relocated abroad. So when some Nigerians even go out of the shores of this country seeking medical attention, they still come before the Nigerian doctors. So it's not like we do not have the specialized experts here to take care of medical needs of Nigerians. It's just that we've not developed capacity to retain them, and so they've moved. And so Nigerians are now moving to seek them where they are. All right, now let's bring in our guest, Nancy Abdulhadi, who is Director, International Relations, Farco Pharmaceuticals Egypt, the CEO, and also IBIS. So welcome, Nancy. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you for joining us. You're calling from the U.S. It's a lot of sacrifice doing this, and we appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So moving forward now, looking at medical tourism, what are your thoughts on it? Now, tourism, like we've stated here, is supposed to be fun, but we've seen that over the years, people move from one country to the other seeking medical care. Should it be something that we want to develop, or countries should develop?
Yes, you're right. And when we speak about medical tourism, it has kind of two sides to it, because we talk about, from one side, Africans traveling outside of the continent to seek medical care, usually in the Western countries, or the other side, which is African countries actually developing either national or regionally their healthcare facilities to actually attract more medical tourists. So it's kind of both sides. It's again, people traveling outside of the continent to get medical care, and also different African countries trying to develop their own medical tourism. And it's an important aspect of each of our African countries and the region's economy, but it also has its pros and cons as well.
Okay, let's look at the primary reasons that Africans, advance forward before they embark on medical tourism. From our own initial conversation, we spoke about the fact that maybe we don't have the healthcare facilities around here, or maybe it's the lack of political will on the part of some African, governments to do this. What other reasons, from your point of expertise, do Africans advance for embarking on medical tourism?
Yes, sure. So from the one side of Africans traveling abroad to seek medical treatment, again, it comes from a lack of trust in their own healthcare facilities. So they're either leaving the country because they either are looking for more affordable healthcare treatments or looking for advanced treatments, because their perception is that the quality of care they will get abroad is better. in the sense of within the countries itself, like you said, you know, the government, the political will to actually invest in the local healthcare facilities or even the private facilities that can attract the medical tourists. So this is a major step in terms of a country developing its medical tourism.
Now, what are the long-term consequences of relying on medical tourism for provision of medical care?
Sure. Well, I mean, if we're looking at, for example, several of our African countries, including our country, Egypt, several of our, let's say, political leaders have traveled abroad, you know, at the expense of the government, you know, to seek medical care. So this is a drain, of course, on our individual economies. That's one thing. That's also, if we're talking about private individuals, that's money not being spent in the country, but being spent abroad. So it does have long-term consequences. And again, for people to perceive that they cannot access quality care in their own countries. This is a big problem because, again, as you had mentioned, it causes also a brain drain because many of the professional healthcare you know, experts, doctors, nurses, they're actually leaving their countries to go to some of these countries that are known for medical tourism because they have better salaries, benefits, opportunities also to work with advanced, you know, medical technology. And so we're losing a lot of great doctors. And I know you mentioned earlier, like the fact, like, you know, of Africans traveling, let's say, to the West to seek medical treatment, and much to their surprise, the doctor who's actually caring for them is an African doctor, which we see often. One of the top experts in liver transplants in the United States actually is from Egypt, and he's in Pennsylvania. So this is quite common. Very sad, though, that we as Africans are not directly benefiting from those professionals in our countries.
Okay, let's look at the place of, you know, insurance, health insurance, comprehensive and affordable health insurance in discouraging, you know, medical tourism, especially for Africans, because there is so little that individuals can do on their own, but insurance is a kind of leverage they can take advantage of to make things happen beyond their own financial limits. What should be the exact role of medical insurance in discouraging medical tourism from the African point of view?
Okay, so like if we're looking at the idea of Africans, let's say, traveling abroad because they are seeking more affordable healthcare, that's an issue because there's a need for like national healthcare coverage. So citizens should have access to affordable, safe, effective, you know, healthcare within their own countries. If you're looking also like like I want to give you an example with Egypt, for example, our company, we had a campaign, it was called Touring Cure, which is, you know, a very successful medical tourism campaign. And the idea was to provide treatment for people with hepatitis C. So it was encouraging people from all over the world to come to Egypt to get the treatment. It's affordable. Well, the government actually, as part of that, they offered this screening and treatment to the citizens, to all the Egyptian, because Egypt is one of the countries that was most affected, you know, by hepatitis C. And so the treatment was offered for free. So it was sort of like a national coverage for screening and for also treatment. So this is something that's quite important for governments to be able to provide access to quality healthcare for their citizens. So healthcare, national healthcare access and insurance is essential in order for people to not think of leaving their country because they will have access to affordable and effective health treatment.
Okay, from what we've all alluded to, as the fact that we have the specialists from Africa that can actually cater to whatever specialized medical need that Africans would have. So what then is needed to develop the health sector in Africa so that Africa can begin to gain from medical tourism?
Yes. So one of the things, and the main thing, is investment. There must be, and this starts from the government, there needs to be more investment into the healthcare systems to develop those systems. There need to be more investment in research. And that comes also from partnerships with centers of excellence from around the world for other, international health facilities or institutions. And we see several of those partnerships. Like, for example, again, in Egypt, we have 357 hospital, which is a pediatric cancer hospital, and it's a center of excellence. And there's a strong partnership with Harvard Medical School and also St. Jude in the United States. So if we see this happening, in Egypt, and we have this all across the board in Africa, many centers of excellence, many medical facilities that have partnerships with these international institutions or organizations, because this can also help us build capacity. So providing training for our healthcare professionals, because again, one of the main things that Africans decide to travel to the West or travel abroad for healthcare is because they perceive that they will get better, quality of care. They will have more professional healthcare, providers. Whereas if we invest in training our own healthcare professionals, this will also help a lot to, avoid from people thinking that they need to travel abroad to get quality care.
Okay, you spoke so glowingly about Egypt and what Egypt is achieving in the area of medical practice. And if you ask an average Nigerian, he will probably speak about what Nigeria can do. A South African will do the same thing. Now, this speaks to something, an idea in my head. What about the possibilities of collaboration by African governments to come together and pool resources, not just in terms of funding alone, in terms of expertise, cross-border exchanges that can lead to a big, giant medical institution that Africans can actually, take advantage of as against shipping money overseas because of medical tourism. What happens to that kind of collaboration? Is it possible, or is it in the works in the first place?
Absolutely. It's essential. One of the things is, like you said, collaboration. Sharing best practices, sharing and pooling resources. We see this, for example, with telemedicine. There are several successful, I can think of offhand, Nigerian telemedicine, companies that actually have crossed borders. Many of their doctors are actually Egyptian, because with telemedicine, now, I can be sitting in the United States and I can, be on a call with a doctor in Morocco or in Nigeria or in Egypt. And so this is really, it's cross borders. But what you're saying is really key, and it goes back to South-South cooperation. So we as a region, Africa and developing countries, if we pool our resources, if we share best practices, if we establish, centers of excellence that are in strategic areas. You have a center in Ethiopia, and you have a center in Egypt or in Nigeria and Kenya. This will then again help us to build trust among Africans that they don't need to travel outside of the continent to get quality healthcare. They can receive that quality healthcare from within. And again, because we have limited resources, it's so easy to say we need to invest in the healthcare facilities and to improve and upgrade our healthcare system. But where do those resources come from? So what you've said is quite strategic. If we're able to pool those resources, if we're able to benefit from the different expertise, so Nigeria is known for, specialized surgeries, while Egypt is known for dental or cosmetic surgeries, while Morocco. So if we actually, as a region, also cooperate in the sense that each country can actually develop their own expertise or, be specialized in a specific medical field, that's key.
Okay, let's move away from orthodox treatments to alternative medicine, which Africa seems to have a lot of resources that can be used. So is there a way to build capacity in this area so that we can maybe have some form of comparative advantage in that sector, as we seem to be doing a bit of catch-up when it comes to drawing people or attracting a lot of people to Africa for medical tourism using orthodox treatments?
Absolutely. And again, I'm sorry I keep going back to the example of Egypt, but for example, we have Aswan is quite known for alternative medicine treatments, wellness and different treatments that actually, are non-invasive. And Egypt is, or Aswan is just one example, but I've seen this in many countries across Africa. And I think, like you said, we can champion, ourselves as a continent and excel in that. Again, it just takes cooperation. It just takes investment in that, developing that section of the healthcare system. I think we can definitely have an advantage for sure.
On the very last note for me, I know we've spoken glowingly about the need for Africans to come together and build their own health infrastructure. But that is not a one-day assignment. It takes time. And while we work on that, people will still need to get better. They still need to access health where they can find it, meaning medical tourism is not going anywhere soon. Okay, but then what are the ethical considerations that we should put into use when we are embarking on medical tourism? Now that we really can't, self-cure ourselves at this point in time, what are the ethical practices we should use when we're embarking on medical tourism?
Yes. So you said something very important again, cooperating on a regional level in terms of developing medical tourism across the border, and this is something that can definitely benefit as African countries, our individual economies. But the ethical considerations that we must keep in mind is we cannot compromise investment in, local healthcare facilities just to promote or develop our medical tourism. And we see this a lot. So the money goes into the urban communities versus the rural communities. And so the citizens themselves don't have access to safe, affordable, effective healthcare. So there has to be a balance in a sense that when we're promoting this medical tourism, it cannot compromise or take away from investment and development of local healthcare facilities and the services that are provided to each individual citizens. So this, I think, is one of the top ethical considerations. The other thing is the patient themselves traveling to the different countries. They need to have access to information. Their consent needs to be given. They have to give their consent and be aware and informed about what medical treatment they're going to be receiving. There shouldn't be any cultural language barriers. And this is why in these facilities, we train the professionals to speak, the major languages like English and French, for example. So there isn't this miscommunication between the healthcare professionals and the patients seeking treatment. So I think these are the majority of the ethical, points. And again, with the brain drain, so medical professionals might leave the local hospitals or clinics, seeking jobs in those facilities that offer medical tourism because the salaries will be better, maybe the benefits or the opportunities there. So again, this might take resources from the local healthcare system. So there again has to be a sort of balance.
Okay, given the economic disadvantage that medical tourism is to Africa at this point, and the poor perception that it gives the health sector in Africa, what policies should African leaders be looking at? What areas of investment should African leaders be looking at as regards building self-reliant healthcare systems?
Yes, so those policies, again, as we mentioned, it's important to have partnerships and collaboration, whether it's between, the different countries within Africa, or between our healthcare facilities and international partners, centers of excellence abroad. So the government, in terms of like the paperwork, taxation, those types of like red tape, things should be streamlined, to promote and to encourage, also investment into the healthcare system. In addition to that, for tourism purposes, because again, this is medical tourism, the government plays a huge role in terms of also streamlining the visa process, making it easy for tourists to come to the countries, to find proper and safe accommodation, transportation. The infrastructure should be developed. So investment not just in the healthcare centers, but also in infrastructure. This is all from the government side. In addition, again, like I said, making the process easier, whether it's for the investors who are, investing in medical centers that will be working in the medical tourism side, or in the side of partnerships with other countries and also international institutions, or with the patients themselves, making it easier for them to travel. Like I said, the visa process. And this happens also in partnership with the tourism authorities or Ministry of Tourism. So having that partnership helps streamline the process and makes it a better experience for both the provider and also the patient that's seeking treatment.
All right, we must say a very big thank you to you, Nancy Abdelhadi, for joining the conversation. We have been educated, and I do hope that African leaders will take some of these things to heart and make Africa a destination of choice, even if there will be medical tourism. Thank you very much once again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And if you allow me just to say one last quick thing.
Okay.
Also with the African Tourism Board. So this is something when we talk about collaboration and we talk about partnerships, these regional organizations can help, just like the African Union, to promote collaboration between us. We as a continent are powerful in all aspects of our tourism. And if we work together and work on a regional level, we can be very successful. And I'm very optimistic, and thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you too. Okay, that is the show today, and as a matter of fact, that is the show for the entire week. We have done it once again, and you have done it once again from Monday to Friday. Thank you very much to the entire production team, led by Bumi Dowu and assisted by Juvio Fiene, Ahmed Jayola, and all of you. Thank you, Babatope Olufemi. It is time now for me, Ayo Jimmy, to embark on culinary tourism, and maybe later in the evening on film tourism. Blessing, are you in or out?
Okay, the weekend is calling, and I definitely cannot be out. Two things are top: rest and re-strategizing for the new week. So it's a call for all of us to support the tourism sector. Let's go touring. And then for medical tourism, we can do this, be their own. So let's begin to build and develop our own to attract people to Africa for medical tourism. Business Insight comes up at 10 o'clock, where Olaoluwa Awe will give you updates in the business world. I am Blessing A2. Be sure to enjoy your weekend and stay with Sick News. It's bye.